Hello again, I'm back! I'm not sick anymore! Yay! Yeah. Yeah, I'm back reading The Cat Who Came In From the Cold by Deric Longden. And Lola's just sat next to me. Let's hope she doesn't interrupt me during the video. We are on chapter 10. Should get comfortable. Mrs. Crampton came to do for us on Wednesday morning, and by Wednesday afternoon I was swearing that one of these days I was going to do for Mrs. Crampton. She came to Hoover here and there. Yeah, she came to Hoover here and there, just here and there, and spread despondency? Never heard of that word before. Here, there, and everywhere. This was only her third week, and I already had known her a lifetime. We've got to get rid of her. We can't. Not while she's still depressed. Mrs. Crampton had been depressed ever since the 21st of December, 1982, when, at 11:30 that evening, her husband Harold had told her that the mince pies she had bought from Marks and Spencer were a damn sight better than the ones she made herself. It's the sort of remark that just might get up your nose if you have always fancied yourself as a dab hand with pastry, but it's not really enough to form the basis of a 5-year depression. It was the following March before she spoke to him again, and the truce that followed was an uneasy truce, shadowed as it was by the thought that things could never be the same again. Now, in the run-up to the 5th Christmas, the memory still burned bright, and over the past 2 weeks I had learned more about Harold, mince pies, and Mrs. Crampton than I ever wished to know. Aileen had decided it would be a nice idea to have the Christmas tree in the hall this year. We'll have all the presents underneath. Thermal thought it was a great idea. I had been giving him regular runs around the courtyard to make sure he knew his way around, and he loved the trees out there. He had sharpened his claws on them and climbed up them and fallen out of them, and he was quite overwhelmed. As he watched us put the tree together, he rubbed around my ankles and expressed his appreciation. "This is awfully good of you. I don't deserve it, really. I shan't need to go out at all now." Hold on a minute. Itchy leg. I make weird noises, okay? Not my fault. I soon put him right. I picked him up and delivered a short, sharp lecture on the subject. "No, you're not going to go anywhere near it." "It's pointless telling him that," said Aileen. "You know what he's like. He understands more than you think." Thermal nodded in agreement. He was reaching that age when he could be trusted to act in a responsible manner. He wasn't a kitten anymore. She picked him up and gave him a cuddle. "He's only a kitten." He snuggled his head under her chin and stuck his nose under her sweater. Being a kitten wasn't that bad, really. Maybe he'd give it a few more years. We were sorting out the decorations when a rather damp Mrs. Crampton arrived. Aileen was in her study, uncomplicating a string of Chinese lanterns. And I was hard at work, strapping a splint to the wing of a crippled angel. Bit of a breather. Thermal had just dragged the one-legged fairy under the hostess trolley and was about to have his way with her. Mrs. Crampton took off her wet coat and slung it over the telephone table. They shed needles all over the place, she grumbled. As she stuck a slice of loaf under her coat. And I know who'll have to hoover it up. It's plastic, I told her. It's artificial. They're just as bad, she said, marching off into the kitchen. They get everywhere, they do. Thermal poked his head out from under the trolley at the sound of a strange noise. A strange voice, even. Who was that? Mrs. Crampton. Who? Mrs. Crampton. You haven't met her yet. I can't hear you, shouted Mrs. Crampton from the kitchen. You'll have to come in here if you want to. My God, what's that? She was staring in horror at the litter tray. It's for the cat. You haven't got a cat. Yes, we have. I've never seen one. Good morning, welcomed Thermal as he strode into the kitchen. I don't believe we've met. She relaxed slightly at the sight of him. The size of the litter tray must have led her to believe that we were harbouring an undernourished leopard. He'd disappeared before you started, I told her. He came back at the weekend. So you don't have to worry anymore, Thermal assured her. She folded her arms and sized him up. His coat still hung loosely like an ill-fitted anorak, and he'd spread the oil and grease with his tongue now, so that he had about him the grey, anonymous look of a technical college lecturer. I can't stand cats, she said. They shed everywhere. I can't be doing with cats. I tried to keep him out of the way, but she seemed to go looking for him. He still needed his rest, but no sooner had he collapsed in front of a radiator than in would come Mrs. Crampton, and before he knew where he was halfway up an attachment and heading tail first for the dust bag. She also told tales. Every 10 minutes or so, she would burst into my office with a cushion under her arm. Just look at the cat hairs on this. It's disgusting. You want to keep him off the furniture. I brought him into the office to keep him away from her, and he sat on my desk and watched me type. I remember doing this before. It's all coming back to me now. I remembered as well. Remembered him sitting there, explaining in fine detail the workings of a writer's office to his friend the Sultana. I've got a surprise for you. What about this? I picked up the matchbox from beside the ashtray and slowly pushed open the drawer. He stuck his nose inside and sniffed. What? I tipped it upside down and his friend the Sultana fell out. The rest seemed to have worked wonders for the wizened little grape, and he sat on my blotter looking plump and refreshed. If anything, he had fared better than Thermal, who still looked thin and pale. But then he was supposed to be a white kitten. They were delighted to see one another again, and charged all over the desk. Thermal, the playful aggressor, the Sultana pretending to be frightened. They must have got the idea from watching Aileen and me. I found it difficult to work against the whining of the Hoover as it thumped its way around the hall. Mrs. Crampton had a bad effect on the Hoover, and it went through a personality change while in her charge. It attacked skirting boards and doors. Instant freedom had also slightly deranged the Sultana. It was overexcited, and then Thermal looked embarrassed in its behaviour. I gave up and went to finish off the Christmas tree.